Queen failure has become a very consistent and alarming aspect of beekeeping today. A healthy, well-raised queen honeybee is a very important insect to have in your hive. Demand for high-quality queens always exceeds the supply. Our focus of this video is to show you how high-quality queens are raised by Henry Brooks in South Carolina each spring. This video is dedicated to the late Lynn Barton of Morse, New York. Lynn was one of the most accomplished queen rearing specialists on the East Coast. Lynn worked with some of the most established queen producers in our country, and he will be dearly missed. Lynn passed on much of his knowledge and queen rearing business to Henry Brooks. I've had the great privilege of working with both of these gentlemen over the past decade in South Carolina. In this video, we will follow Henry through the process of queen rearing. Traditionally, queens have lived productive lives for 3 to 5 years. Today's queens are considered old when they reach 2 to 3 years, and they often fail before that. Because of queen failure being so common, it is extremely important to have quality queens in your hive. Beekeepers large and small depend on people like Henry Brooks to keep their apiary healthy and productive. Henry produces queens primarily for commercial beekeeping. This means that he has to make quality queens and do it efficiently in order to keep up with the demands. All queens start out as a female worker egg. Around day 3, the egg hatches into a tiny larva. The first step in grafting is to select a suitable frame of larva. The very smallest of larvae are used for grafting new queens.
This is the frame that I want to graft from. I'm looking for frames of eggs where the eggs are just hatching and that larva is as tiny as it can be. And some of those larvae are so small that they're actually smaller than an egg. So a lot of times I'll be looking in the bottom of that cell and I can't even see the larva, but I can see the royal jelly that's in the bottom.
I see.
And I can tell that there is a larva there. That little splotch of royal jelly will tell me that there's a larva there.
At this point, the larva is floating in a modest pool of royal jelly. Royal jelly is the super protein that the honeybees produce in order to raise their young. The royal jelly is produced by very young worker bees, roughly 5 to 14 days old. They feed that royal jelly to developing larvae. When new larva is fed large amounts of royal jelly, the sexual organs then mature and it becomes a queen honeybee. Worker larva will never become a queen unless it is fed a lot of royal jelly during this period. Once the frame of larva is selected, it is brought into the warm grafting shed. The task of grafting requires great vision, a steady hand, and a lot of patience. All right, Henry, what do you got?
Grafting some larvae. So what I'm doing is I'm just use my headlamp here to look down in the brood, and I've got some frames of larvae picked out already. They're about the right age, but I have to pick out the right age larvae and transfer them over into these artificial cell cups. So that's called grafting.
Worker larva is grafted out of a worker cell and placed into a queen cup. These queen cups are a little bit roomier than a worker cell and allows for your larva to develop into a queen as it's being fed large amounts of royal jelly. Each bar contains 15 cups, and there are a total of 45 cups to the 3-barred frame. Having your queen cups on bars and then in frames allows your beekeeper to move these queen cups through the system from going from a starter to a finisher and then later on to a mating nuke. The frames of cups are then placed into a starter colony. This starter hive is the first of 3 specialized hives that Henry will use to go through the process of queen rearing. The starter hive has a ton of young queenless bees. These young queenless bees have pollen and nectar, and they're also being fed. The hive also lacks eggs and larvae. Without eggs and larvae to raise into a new queen, the workers are panicked. The top priority for these young worker bees is to feed these larvae big amounts of royal jelly so that they can raise a new queen so that that hive can have a future. After about 24 hours, the frame of queen cells is removed from the starter and it's going to end up in the top box of the finisher.
So when I'm pulling these out, I want to see bees hanging right off the frames. That's a good indicator that they're plenty strong enough for what I need them to do. These are just starting the cells. So once they start feeding them, that's a successful start. So as long as there's royal jelly in the bottom of that cup and they haven't just cleaned it out, that's a sign that it's successful. Which most of these are. There's probably like 3 or 4 misses on this whole frame of 32. So, and I'll pull out this next frame. And when I'm shaking these bees off, you notice I grab it by the corner and I flip it upside down. That larva is sitting in a pool of jelly, so it keeps them from being damaged. And you can give them a couple shakes. And I look down into the bottom of the tip of that cell cup and I'm looking for anything that is amiss. So I've got 2, 3, 4 misses out of like 45 or more.
The cells that are properly started stay on the bars and they go into the finisher hive. The finisher hive is the second specialized hive used in this queen rearing. That finisher hive is slightly different from the starter hive in that it is queen right, or it has a laying queen already in the bottom box. Then there's a queen excluder, then the top box where the graft goes. So the queen excluder is essential because it keeps that queen from going up through into the top box and chewing down and destroying the cells that we're building. The finisher hive has the big heavy lift when it comes to cell development. The finisher hive needs a lot of resources in order to finish these cells. That whole hive system has some nectar and pollen in it, and it also is fed heavily by your beekeeper in order to produce a ton of royal jelly.
And I'll carry these over here to my finishers. And I'll look at these, and if I have one of them that may look slightly stronger than the other, I'll give it that 3-bar frame, which this one looks like it's slightly stronger, so I'll give her the one with more cells on it. Give her a little more work. This one, for whatever reason, might be slightly less strong.
8 days after grafting, the cells are removed from the finisher and inspected. At this point, these cells have been fed tons of royal jelly, they're capped over, and they look a lot like a peanut. The larva has now developed into a pupa.
Now you see how some of these have a ton of jelly in the bottom. A lot of times you'll look at that ton of jelly and you'll say that's a really well-fed cell, but sometimes when what I'm dealing with here with the yellow jasmine, if that larva doesn't pupate and it dies before it has a chance to finish the jelly, you'll notice if you look at some of these tips, how they're kind of gross and nasty looking, and you got some chew outs here. So that to me indicates that these bees are smelling that dead larva and they're chewing it out and cleaning it out. And these ones that haven't been chewed out yet, they have the royal jelly in the bottom of them and the tips look kind of nasty. When I go in to candle those, I could almost guarantee that those tips have a dead larva in them and that cell is no good. So I would look at this and I would say that that whole frame is no good. Now you look at this, see these frames came from the same starter. All this has to do with is the finisher, because if you look at this frame, these are all okay. There's no chew out, there isn't a whole pile of chew outs, and there isn't a pile of royal jelly in the bottom of the cups. These ones, it's a different story. So this hive, if I had to guess, is getting more yellow jasmine than this hive. And that's why you're seeing the symptoms of it on those cells.
There's a look at that yellow jasmine, South Carolina's state flower, poisonous to the honeybees.
Okay. If you look at these cells, you're noticing that some of these are uncapped and there's a ton of jelly in them, and they're a different age than the rest of these cells. And if you hadn't seen this before, you might not know what it is, but the only reason that these could be a different age is because these were actually chewed down and a queen laid in these. So there was actually, this finisher had a hole in the excluder, and the queen had gotten through and gotten up here and chewed some of the cells and laid eggs in the brood frames up top here. And I'm pretty sure these are from her laying back in the cell cups.
After being taken out of the finisher, they are placed inside an incubator in the grafting shed. Next, the cells are candled and culled. Here, Henry shows the process of quality control. As with previous steps, failed cells are culled and removed. Some failed cells are not obvious, especially when capped over. In order to check on the cells after they've been capped over, Henry candles these cells. Candling is a process of putting the cells in front of a light source in order to check on the integrity of the cells. Cells are turned up and then tapped gently. The pupa drops in a healthy cell. If the pupa does not drop, that means something is wrong and that cell is culled.
When I'm candling them, I'll hold them down as they normally would be in the hive, and then I flip them upright, and the pupa will actually drop in that cell. And when you hold them up to the light, you can see them drop. And I might tap them a couple times with my finger. If they're hung up in there a little crooked or anything like that, they fall down. And when you're shining that light through that cell, if it's a dead larva, it'll stick up at the top. So you'll be able to tell pretty easily if the larva died from viral damage or yellow jasmine or anything like that. That larva will be dead up in the tip, and the whole cell will be bright. You can see light all the way through it. The pupa stick out pretty good. They're like a dark shadow in there. You might not be able to see them perfectly. But the other thing I'll look for too is any of those pupa that are alive, I'll look at them close and check the size of them too, because at the base of that cell cup is relatively clear and you can see the size of the pupa. So if I see something that's substantially smaller, I'll try to cull that. So this is my culling time when I'm looking at these cells. First. So when I get that out of there, I pop the bar out. I lean that frame right up like that. It's relatively warm here in the queen shed, so you'll see a lot of them haven't dropped, but if I give them a couple taps, just a couple gentle taps with my fingertip, a few of these drop. See? Now I got a couple here, here, and here that didn't drop. This one's a dead larva, because you can see there's no pupa shadow. These other ones here, that looks like a pupa that's hung up. That one's a dead larva up at the tip. And we can tear that open here in a second if we want. But something like that where I might see a pupa that's stuck in the cell, like she doesn't quite want to drop, I might give that a couple extra taps just to see. See, that one just dropped. And this one doesn't want to drop. So I'll call that one. That's my candling method there. 5, 6, 7. So I'm getting my count as I candle as well. And I just gently put them in the bottom of that container. These are 10-day-old cells, so they're relatively tough. So this is the one that I believe has a pupa in it that she just didn't want to drop, but we can take a second look at that. If I tap it pretty hard, she does drop, but because she's stuck up in the tip, there might be something wrong with that pupa. It might not be visible to the naked eye right now, but that's what they're supposed to look like. So there may have been something wrong with that, there may not have been, but if she's stuck to the tip of that cell, there's a possibility that there's something wrong with that pupa. Now this other one, I can already tell that is a dead larva that's up at the top that didn't develop, either through viral damage or poisoning. So when I tear that open, I have seen it enough times that I can tell something's wrong. So that wasn't a dead larva, but that pupa is substantially smaller than that other one. And she's stuck up in the top of that cell. So that might also be a cause of poisoning because it hinders the development of the pupa. So that's a good thing to call out. Not something that I want.
Next, these ripe cells are introduced into mating nukes. The mating nuke is the final specialized hive that we'll be mentioning today. These tiny colonies have a handful of queenless bees and are well fed.
They're 4-way mini mating nukes. So each one of these boxes has 4 compartments with separate individual hives, and I've already got the lid off, and this is a burlap gasket that we use to separate each compartment from each other. That way they don't communicate and they kill each other's queen.
Part of that task is going to be involving feeding these with some sugar syrup.
I give them a little bit of smoke and I spread the frames out, and you get a couple fingertips on that cell cup, and you got to get right down in there on the brood, and I just push that plastic part of that cell cup into the wax where that brood is so that they cover it overnight. And I might even move the cell back and forth to get the bees out of the way so I'm not crushing bees underneath it. I just jam it in against that wax. Put that tip right down in the bottom corner and just give it like a quick open and close.
I see.
That's just like a quarter of a feeder for these things, which is all they really need.
Okay.
I don't really want to give them too much and have them be burr-combed all up, because we're gonna get coming into a honey flow here right now.
Okay.
So if you give them a quick shot of feed and close them up, and all you want to do is when you close these, just get them so that that plastic cell cup is just catching that wax on the frame next to it. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. Just touch it.
Just touching. That's all we're doing, and it's just that. Whoops, sorry. Just that plastic part of it is all you want to catch.
Yep.
And that's all there is.
The new queens will be emerging from these cells shortly after being introduced to the mating nuke. After a few days, the virgin queen will go out for one or more nuptial flights or mating flights. A nuptial flight is a mating flight. Some of the time there's one nuptial flight and some of the time there's a few. That virgin queen will fly off and will be mated with several different drones. Sometimes there's 20 plus drones that mate that queen. Each of those drones that has mated with that queen will die after that mating. After a few days of returning from her mating flights, the queen will start laying its eggs. As with the previous steps in queen rearing, some of the queens don't make it through the process. Some fall victim to predators, some fail to emerge, and some are not accepted by the workers in the mating nukes. One of my favorite parts of working with new queens is going through the mating nukes and catching the queens and putting them in a little queen cage.
I'm here catching queens. I'll take this and give it a little bit of smoke before I even pull that gasket up. This is our first round of catching, and these were built on dry comb with 1 soup can of bees and an 11-day cell and a feeder full of syrup. So as I'm going through this, I'm looking at the health of the colony. That one is obviously a lot stronger because of that burr comb that they've made. I'm looking at the health of the colony. The first thing I'm looking for is eggs when I pull this up, and I already see a patch of eggs right here. These, I believe, are 15 days since we put a cell in them. So I'll pull this next frame out. She's probably going to be on one of these 2 frames, or she's running around in the box. So I do a quick once over, pull my old cell cup out, and I'm looking at the wall here as I'm going by because I didn't see her on the first round. She's probably camo. She's probably in the box. So now we got to look down in here because she's once they run out of places to lay on the comb, they start hunting around, so they're less likely to be on the comb once they've laid everything up. I don't see her in the box either, and I don't see her in the feeder. So I could have just missed her on the comb. She's playing in the end bar right here. She's camo. Sometimes if she's playing around the end bars like that, I'll put my fingers on the back side so that she has to come through, and I'll get my fingers on her and I'll just grab her by her wings just a little bit. As soon as I get a hold of her with one hand, I get my other hand on her and I get her between 3 fingers and I get her head pointed out, and I'm holding her by her thorax. So once I get a good hand on her, then I worry about a cage. I get my queen cage and I have that open, get her head first going down in, and I'll have my other finger here to kind of close that hole up once she's in there. So I can let her down nice and easy into there. She crawls down in. I'll hold my finger over that, and once she's down away from that door, I can snap that shut and I don't have to worry about smashing her or catching a leg. And I close my locker tab and that's caught. Now this one has brood on both frames and a frame of honey. This one's good for another cell. So as I'm catching, I'll fix any mistakes or problem ones, anything that didn't take a queen, I'll fix them. So we'll go through the second one here. And I'm gonna guess and say, that's queen right, and there she is. We're in the shade here a little bit, so it's hard to see the eggs, but there is a pile of eggs there. So like I said, I get 3 fingers on her, point her head first down into the cage, drop her down in, close that shut, lock it up. Get into this other side and see what we got going on here. Open her right up, get into this first frame, looking for eggs. I got eggs, so I'm looking for a queen. There she is. Got my queen, got her on 3 fingers. I'll pull the cell cup. A lot of times I'm doing multiple things at once, so I'll pull cell cup as I'm catching a queen. Got her on 3 fingers, head first into the cage, lock her up.
The queen cage is designed so that it houses the queen and it allows the beekeeper to introduce it into a package of bees or into a nucleus hive. It has a sugar plug there. The sugar plug blocks the entrance and exit of that queen cage. And as that sugar plug gets chewed out by the worker bees that are attracted to that queen, they will slowly get to know one another, and that will help those new bees accept that new queen. Finally, the queens are sold and delivered. It's important to understand the process of queen rearing so that you can get an appreciation for how complex it is. Without queen rearing specialists like Henry Brooks, beekeepers everywhere would struggle to keep their apiaries alive. Our hope is that this video helps people understand this fascinating process. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more in-depth beekeeping videos from Bee Hugger. So you worked with Chuck Kudick when you were 18, is that right, Henry?
Yeah, I went to their honey house during the BOCES New Visions program, and they said they would be looking for some help over the summertime. And I said I'd be interested in doing that, and they had my resume, so they called me early in the springtime to come work for them. And the first thing I was doing there for maybe a few days was moving empty barrels to the honey house or out of the honey house and labeling honey for maybe the first couple days. And then I worked with a guy named Bill Steiner. They're transferring 3-frame nukes into 5-frame boxes. So they were 10-frame deeps that were divided into 3-frame nukes. And we'd go through, find the queen, put her in the 5-frame nuke so they had more room. And that was like the first bee work that I ever done. And I had full suit and gloves and got stung in the lip. And then the next day they sent me to work with Lynn Barton doing the queen work, catching queens and dealing with cells and running the grafting yard. But I was pretty fresh and green then, so I didn't really know a heck of a lot about it. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And first time catching queens, I was all full suit and gloves and wasn't even touching queens. I was just finding them for Lynn, and then he would catch them, so helping him out. But that was back in 2011, and then I went to college at Paul Smith's for a semester, the fall semester, and didn't like going there, and it was pretty expensive, so I ended up transferring to Morrisville, but they wouldn't take me, SUNY Morrisville, but they wouldn't take me until the fall of 2012. So that spring of 2012 was the first year I came down here and was helping Chuck and Lynn raising queens and helping Chuck with pulling off 5-frame nukes and making splits and just doing bee work down here, you know. So I spent the whole spring of 2012 down in South Carolina working bees, and I liked it, so I've kind of stuck with it.